Good afternoon. I am Anne Marie Lafaso, the Associate Dean for Faculty Research and Development and Professor of Law at West Virginia University College of Law. Welcome. We have a real treat for everyone this week. We have been celebrating Mexico all week as part of our Archibald MacDougall lecture series on international law. West Virginia University Latin American Studies and the Office of International Programs is co-sponsoring our lecture series this year. Please help me thank the Director of Latin American Studies, Dr. Victoria Garrett, the Associate Provost for International Academic Affairs, Michael Lassinger, and the Director of World Languages, Angel Tuninetti, and our very own Dean McConnell for supporting Mexico Week here at WVU Law. As I said, Mexico Week is part of Archibald MacDougall lecture series on international law. Archibald MacDougall was born on August 5, 1903, in Hobart, Tasmania, the son of Professor Dugald McDougall, a former professor of law and modern history at the University of Tasmania. The younger McDougall earned his bachelor's and law degrees from the University of Tasmania and became Tasmania's Rhodes Scholar in 1924. As a Rhodes Scholar, he matriculated at Balliol College, Oxford University, where he received his Master of Arts and his Bachelor of Civil Law, and then became a barrister. McDougall was a member of the Honorable Society of the Middle Temple, which is one of the 4 Inns of Court exclusively entitled to call their members to the English bar barristers. The Inns of Court are the 4 professional associations for barristers in England and Wales, which have supervisory and disciplinary functions over their members, much like our bar associations have over our attorneys. For most of his career, he was active, McDougall, was active in diplomatic affairs. He was a representative to the United States Senate Legislative Counsel's Office. He was a legal advisor to the Minister of Foreign Affairs and a law professor in Iraq. He was a delegate to the League of Nations. He represented British interests in America during World War II. And after the war, he was a legal advisor at the British Embassy in Egypt and the British Foreign Affairs Office. In 1940, McDougall was given shore leave to enter the United States and California. The passenger list listed McDougall as an English citizen of Scottish descent and as a barrister. His visa was issued in Melbourne, Australia, but his permanent residence is listed as Baghdad, Iraq. He arrived in San Francisco on September 11, 1940. At this time, he was already married to American Corinne Cunningham. McDougall went on to receive an American law education from Columbia University, which is where he met Fulbright. We'll get to that in a second. In 1952, he moved to Berkeley County from Washington, D.C. A well-known attorney in that area, he was a president of the Berkeley County Bar Association. He was a member of the West Virginia State Bar and the American Bar Association. He was also admitted to the United States Supreme Court Bar. Archibald MacDougall passed away on January 14, 1984, in Gerardstown, Berkeley, West Virginia. He was buried in Kew, Victoria, Australia. In 1986, the estate of Archibald MacDougall funded the Archibald MacDougall Visiting Lectureship in International Law to increase student exposure to international law through visiting lectureships. Mr. McDougall wished to honor his, quote, old and revered friends Philip C. Jessup and Francis Deek. As many of you probably know, Philip Jessup served as a professor in international law at Columbia Law School, where in 1946 he was named the Hamilton Fish Professor of International Law and Diplomacy at Columbia Law. Jessup held that post until 1961. From 61 to 1970, Professor Jessup served as a judge on the International Court of Justice. The Philip C. Jessup International Law Moot Court Competition is named for Jessup. That competition, which is the largest and most prestigious moot court competition in the world, simulates a fictional dispute between countries before the International Court of Justice. And so this is the company that McDougall was keeping. Today, the Archibald MacDougall Visiting Lecture Series on International Law evinces the College of Law's continuing commitment to its programs in international law that explore diverse points of view on issues critical to the global legal community. Let me now introduce the faculty member who is responsible for doing most of the hard work putting the series together, in addition to the staff members that have helped him greatly on this project. A native Philadelphian, he was educated at Temple University before receiving his JD from Harvard. His credentials are many, and I'll only name a few. They include serving as a Fulbright Scholar at Macedonia and as a visiting scholar at Cambridge University. He is also a visiting professor at Pitt and the University of Hawaii, and a recipient of the Outstanding Law Faculty Scholarship Award very recently. He started the Immigration and Human Rights Clinic here at the law school about 2 decades ago. Professor Freiburg is a world-renowned international law scholar and teacher who has single-handedly, for many years, run the law school's international law program. He is also, part of that program here will include, on Thursday, is that right? On Thursday, there will be a discussion about the Summer Abroad program at Guanajuato, which is where our visitors are from. And it will start at 1 p.m. And Professor Martin, who is going to be leading that trip with Professor Bowman, Professor Martin will be there to discuss that opportunity with you. It will be in the Davis Gallery. We will now, please help me now welcome your moderator of today's lecture, who will also introduce our guest speaker, Professor James Freiburg.
I promise this is the last introduction. Wouldn't it be great to be Archibald MacDougall's father and be able to say cocktail parties, hey, I'm McDougall from Tasmania? The breadth of our interests today are exemplified by the fact that we are supported by somebody that was the son of a Tasmanian. And our speaker today is from originally Havana, Cuba, but now Guanajuato, Mexico. Katya Rodriguez got her undergraduate degree in sociology from the University of Havana, then went on for a master's in sociology at the Colegio de Mexico. Get that at all right? Finally, she got a PhD at the University of Essex in England, where her dissertation concentrated on the same issue she's talking about today, social policy and poverty in Mexico. She is a member of the National Research System of Mexico, which may sound kind of ordinary, but it's essentially the equivalent of very prestigious national academies of science in many other countries of the world, something that a researcher has to work very hard and be very good to become part of. Her husband claims also to be part of that, but I'm sure Katya is. So it's with great pleasure that I welcome my friend and colleague, Katya Rodriguez, to talk about Mexican social policy and poverty and regulations related to that.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Yes, I'm going to talk about, social policy, but also social rights. I try to relate it, to the main subject of this faculty. I hope that these presentations serve better to understand some of the issues that we have been discussing these days with the students. Let's begin with just some statistics about poverty in Mexico. As you can see, these are the last measures of poverty, official measures of poverty. And poverty in Mexico is really, really high in general. It's nearly half population. which is, which talks about a pretty bad situation in the country. In the last year it was measured, was 2012, it was around 53 million people in the country in poverty. And well, that kind of statistics are the main cause by which recent democracy in the country has not been very effective, and maybe at risk because in some ways has not been able to change the social situation in the country and to improve the situation of disadvantaged population. That's the reason why the country faces serious problem of organized crime and violence and low economic growth. It is all related. One of the things that I want to discuss is that one of the reasons why democracy has not been very effective in improving the social condition is because it hasn't changed the situation of inequality in the distribution of social rights, which are very, very unequally distributed in Mexico. So there are some part of the population that is in severe poverty because, well, it lacks social rights. And well, in that case, there is a double disadvantages because they don't have the necessary income from the market, but also for not being in poverty, but also they don't have the right to ask for support for not being in poverty. Well, why social rights are important? There are two main ways in which people can be out of poverty. Through the system of welfare benefits, the state may reinforce the advantages that different social groups have from the market, maintaining a differentiated pattern of access to those benefits. Or equally, it might compensate individuals from market flaws. For example, it may allocate benefits to a large section of the population that are not part of the workforce. And in that case, for example, the retired, the long-term unemployed, in that case, they could be better in a better situation. So social rights, as opposed to political and civil rights, requires a more active intervention of the state in order to reinforce those rights. Well, you have been in the last years in a very important discussion here around health care. So that's a very important issue for all societies. Well, how are the social rights in Mexico? As well, there are 3 articles on the Constitution that refers to those rights. However, even that the text of the Constitution reinforces some rights, some social rights, in practice it has been difficult to have those rights for most of the population because the adherence to the rule of law in Mexico have often seemed more like an aspiration than like a reality. The first article that, well, before, it is important to mention that Mexico have been, so Mexican society and Mexican politics have been ordered around a system of, a pattern of corporatism. So it refers to system of government in which societies organize into certain social groups like industrial, social, and professional organizations that serves in theory as instruments of political representation. However, it might operate to control the activities of the members of those groups. And Mexico has been organized, particularly in the whole period of the perfect dictatorship, the period that Patricia mentioned yesterday. They have been organized around some important groups: workers, rural peasants, and also the businessmen, which are very important. It's a very important organization. They are very well organized in Mexico. And, well, there are others, general sectors, which don't pertain to any of those three groups that I already mentioned. The laws and regulations that have been adopted through the 20th century reflect this corporative system. That's the main thing. Because the granting of rights were differentiated according to the membership of different groups. So, which are these rights? Well, Article number 3 is the one to establish the right to education. This means that there is obligation from the state to provide free education from elementary, primary, secondary, and high school education, which is it's supposed to be free of charge of any fees and mandatory for all. But one thing is to guarantee the existence of public schools for all children, and quite another to provide the quality of education that children really need. So this public system has been complemented with a private schools that provides better education, education with a better quality. And all those schools are available particularly to the middle and the upper classes. Article number 4. Article number 4 is another article of the Constitution related to social rights. And in this case, the article established the protection to or the right to the protection of health care. It established that all persons are entitled to protection of their health, and, that the state is responsible for that. However, in practice, the national health care system is made of different institutions with different levels of benefits and with different levels of coverage for the population. There have been one social security coverage for the formal workers and, for the public servants. And for many, many years, there have been not any coverage for the rest of the population. That has changed very recently, but at the moment there are important differences. I'm going to talk about that later. Important difference in the coverage and in the quality of the service. The other article that refers to social rights is 123, which is about, particularly about the obligation of employers and it regulates all the things related to work relations. According to this article, there are certain benefits for workers, certain rights for workers, like, well, a working day of 8 hours, paid vacations, the right to access to social security, which includes health care, but also includes the right to a pension, to the right to maternity leave, and some other benefits for the worker and their families. This is a very long article, actually. Well, then, how is organized the social rights in Mexico according to different social sectors? Who gets what? It is important, in order to understand what happens in Mexico, it is important to differentiate between the modern economic sector or formal sector of the economy and the informal sector. In similarity to the industrialized countries, the working conditions and benefits of the formal economy are legally regulated and guaranteed. However, in the case of Mexico, as there is not any unemployment insurance provided under any of the social protection systems, once the worker is out of the formal market, because he or she gets fired, she or he loses all security entitlements. So that's the reason why they are called informal, because they don't have practically nothing. So how is it distributed? First, there are businessmen and the managers of national, international firms, political elite, and high public officers. In that case, well, most of them, particularly public officers, have got high remunerations, and they got wide-ranging social benefits completely financed by the state, such a particular pension system, different from the pension system of others, formal workers, and access to private health service considered very quality paid from the public budget. Also, there are, well, the bureaucracy, middle-level officers. And in that case, they also have they are very well paid, but they have, a pretty big system of social security benefits, with includes health care, pensions, protection against sickness and work accidents. And in this case, this is a contributory benefit that works on the basis of the contribution of the worker, of the state, and also of the private business, if the worker works in the private market. Also, there are the formal workers. In this case, well, mostly skilled manual workers, white and blue-collar workers, employed in the formal market of the economy. And they enjoy also all the protection of work, social benefits. They have the protection of a legally minimum wage in Mexico, which is, at the moment, is not very high, have been very depressed, but they got that protection. They cannot earn less than that. Also there are the informal entrepreneurs, and we began here to talk about the informal market, the informal economy, which is the other part. In that case, all the small business in Mexico are practically informal, most of them. In contrast to the formal business sector, this sector of the market depends on erratic opportunities, and they have a particular relationship to the labor, because in contrast to formal business, where there is a formal contract, labor here is casual, without a contract, and without the access to social benefits. Usually this sector do not pay taxes. That's the reason why they are informal, because the relation with the work, and also because they don't pay taxes. They are mainly, well, on the streets, selling things, and very small enterprises. And there are also the informal workers, which is the workers of the informal sector of the economy. They are mostly unskilled workers in urban economy and rural workers. All rural workers in Mexico are informal. They don't have any benefits. They have very low wages. If they have, I don't have a contract. And, well, the average monetary income of these workers is lower than the formal workers. And for this part of the society, there is no social security. There is social protection programs. This is new. There have been not all the time there. But from 2000 year to now, there have been creating some programs to help this kind of population. However, there are different kind of benefits, and so we can talk about two worlds: the world of social security and the world of social protection. Social security programs offers some benefits in a package. I mean, all of them are included: health insurance, disability insurance, workers' insurance, life insurance. They care for workers' children, retirement pensions, housing loans, and severance payment. But there is not, as I mentioned before, there is not an unemployment insurance. So, when a worker gets fired from the formal market, they'll only have got severance payment, but not an insurance for several months. The Social Security, which includes all those things, is a contributory system in which, as I mentioned, the worker, the employer, and the state pays part each to maintain this system. For the rest of the population, there is social protection, which is very different. In that case, health services are provided for different institutions that the health care provided for Social Security, and there is a very a new program, relative new program called Seguro Popular, which is an insurance, a voluntary insurance for people not in the formal market. Poor people do not need to pay for that because there are exemptions of payment for the poorer people, but not for the others above them. It covers certain health actions, but on everything. It's not a full coverage as is Social Security. People need to pay for it. So also there is a program. Those benefits are not a packages. I mean, people can have one or two, but not all of them as in the Social Security. They care for children of working women without Social Security coverage, but that is very recently too. People also need to pay for that, but before that there was no program at all for that, for working mothers. Also, and this is very recent, there is a non-contributory pension to all persons over 65 years of age. The pension provides is actually very, very slow, if just a small amount of the minimum wage. In that case, people cannot live from that pension. But before that, this is it begins last presidential period. Now, with the new government, it has been they have been trying to reach more population over 65 years of age, because originally it was only for rural areas. Now it is for the whole population. However, the pension is extremely low. And also there is an anti-poverty program called Oportunidades, which is the only program that makes cash transfers to poor households. The benefit is related to the household. The household is required to send children to school and to have some some healthcare actions in order to receive the money. However, not every poor people have the right to ask for that help. It's just the program has a limited number of households that can receive the help. So I think that, we see that around half population was in poverty. I think that in this program it is like 25 million people, around 25 million people, and poverty in Mexico is around 53 million. So it's approximately half people in poverty, which receive these benefits. So in this case of the social protection benefits, they are not related, and they are also if the person enters the formal market, it loses these benefits, which is a problem because a person can be working, can have a very low salary, but as is working with a low salary, is not able to receive the benefits of the program anymore. There is a very important difference between the two systems, the system of Social Security and the system of social protection. And that's the reason why we can talk about two different countries, more or less, in the case of Mexico. But both systems are paid by public money. Are paid by the federal budget, by taxes. But there is a very important difference between the amount that is going to social security programs, which really, the people that have the right to receive those benefits are around 38% of the population, and social protection programs are around 62% of the population. This is important because it is related to the size of the formal and informal market. As you can see, the informal market is bigger than the formal market, and And, well, social protection programs receive less money than social security programs. That's the reason why there is still a huge inequality in Mexico in the distribution of market benefits and social rights or social security benefits. And one of the important things is that social rights have been granted to the people that is advantaged in the market. So they got these double benefits, a good position in the market and also good social rights. And for that, social rights have not compensated social disparities. On the contrary, have contributed to make these disparities bigger. I think that that needs to change in order to make society in Mexico more equal and more, in order to make electoral democracy to work in Mexico and in order to stop migration to the United States and organized crime and all the big problems that Mexico is facing at the moment. So, I think that's it.
I'll give the students time to think of some questions, and I do have a question. Katya, thank you so much for that presentation. I was particularly interested in because I teach labor law and employment law, and a couple of things. One is that the strategy, and I say strategy not necessarily trying to imply that there is intent, but the strategy of having two different workforces is actually quite common. For example, in the United States, you could have tenure-track faculty and adjunct faculty, right? And your tenure-track faculty have all the, the nice money and the, or at least better money and the security and job security, and your adjunct faculty get, less than minimum wage to teach a course, okay? Or you might have in the United States, you have other types of workers, for example, managers that might have a contract of employment and job security, but then you have other parts of the market that have part-time jobs and no job benefits. What we found in studies is that the people that tend to be in the what is called the peripheral as opposed to the core part of the market, labor market, tend to be women, minorities, especially black men, Hispanic men, also women, and then very young people. And so do you see any of that in Mexico, that it's linked to more marginalized members of your society? And if so, how would you characterize those people? Then I have a second question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. In Mexico, I think that the main difference between the formal and the informal market is education. People with lower levels of education are not able to participate. However, in the case of women, they have an important representation in the informal market. They don't have legal rights. They mostly work in, as domestic servants, as in jobs that are not legally regulated. So it's easy to find women. Other sector that is completely in the informal market is the rural sector. All the rural workers, they don't have any right, any protection, any contract. Of course, they have very low levels of education. So I think that the main difference is related to education, in which part, more or less. But yes, because informal urban workers are also probably migrants from rural areas that do not find a space on the formal economy because also the education.
Part of the discussion here in the United States also is that the greater the education, the less likely that you'll end up in this peripheral workforce. Which kind of leads to the second question, which is that I notice that some members of the formal workforce in your country are not just white-collar workers or your professionals, but also your blue-collar workers. And in the United States, once again, you have blue-collar workers in the core, and they tended to be unionized. And so unions have played a role in creating a very robust middle class by having not only workers becoming more skilled and being able to command higher wages, but also then having greater educational opportunities for themselves and for their children, thereby picking up the middle class. And one very powerful criticism of the United States inequality today is that the destruction of unions has actually destroyed the middle class. Do you find that there's been any kind of parallel in Mexico, and are unions playing a similar role in Mexico?
Well, actually, formal workers are mostly are in unions. Unions are not as powerful now as they were like 20 years ago. However, all the workers in unions got important benefits because they negotiate their salaries and some benefits that workers without union are not able to. Actually, one of the main differences between the formal and informal economy is unions, because informal workers, are not in unions. They work in very separate place. They are not able to organize around work demands, around wages demands. So they don't get the benefits that organized worker gets. However, one of the main problems in Mexico, in the Mexico stagnation of the economy, because the economy is not growing and the country is facing serious problem with that, is related to unions. Because unions, well, as I mentioned at the beginning, is a corporative system in which it works with organized groups. Unions have taken advantage of that. They got important benefits, but they are not very productive in terms of economic performance. So that has been a problem for the country, actually, because they get more than they are given, really, to the economy, to the...
Is there one last question? Anyone have a question? Is there a constitutional right to work?
Yes.
And so does that constitute an actual job, a particular type of job, or just to have some sort of income security in case the government can't provide a job for you?
No, actually, it means nothing. I mean, it is on the Constitution. The Constitution says that every person in Mexico has the right to a decent job. However, there is not enforced.
There's no duty on anyone to enforce it. Got it.
No, not at all.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Very interesting.
Thank you.
Michael has a back injury, so.
I have a back injury. Okay. Well, virtually every society I have lived in, which is a couple, has this issue of two economies. You know, the man running for mayor of New York right now as a Democrat is running on this platform that the two New Yorks, you know, the los ricos and los pobres, pobrecitos. So, you know, my question is, and because at least in American society, the two economies are entrenched in the electoral system in a way which depends so much on the rich. You can't run for office in this country without a lot of money.
Yeah.
So, and in other societies, in Hungary where I live part of the time, it's the Roma who are the other class, the underclass, you know. So my question is really, and it's really a naive question maybe, but in Mexico, like, what's a realistic answer? You know, when you talk, for example, in capitalism about income redistribution, that's communism. You know, nobody says those words, you know, income redistribution. But that's what we're really talking about, is income redistribution. So in Mexico, I don't know much about the Mexican economy, but realistically, what proposals are there to...
Well, actually, now the government, even the government is talking about income redistribution, because the problem is so bad that for many years that have been, you know, communism. But now the government is doing, is trying to ask academic community, how can we change this a little bit, because the problem in Mexico is that the size of the informal economy is bigger than the size of the formal economy. So that's huge problem. Well, there are trying to actually already passes a week ago tax reform. They are trying to create like universal social security, but it's not that good as it sounds, because what it's going to imply is that people with the formal social security are going to lose benefits in order to have a lower social security. But they are talking of that because, it's not possible to keep the country as it is. I know that in every country there are two economics and two worlds, and particularly in the case of the United States, it's more related, underclass is more related to illegal immigrants, particularly, the issues that we have been discussing, the Latin American and Mexican migration, because they don't have rights. And that is convenient, of course, for the country economy, for the people that rules the economy. In the case of Mexico, it's the same. That because that is very cheap work, the work provided by the informal economy. So in the case of Mexico, and I suppose that, I don't know, in the case of the United States, but in the case of Mexico, that work have been very useful, because this second economy, this informal economy, provides service that are cheaper. So workers on the formal economy have lower salaries because they are able to consume in the second economy. Because if not, they are not able to consume what they need, no, in order to. It's useful, of course, but the main problem is one is bigger one than the other.
All the ways, yeah, sorry. I'm finished.
Well, particularly in the case of Mexico, there are two main things. One is, they are trying to do this tax reform in order, that in my opinion is not well done, because it's only to pay the middle class, to put the middle class to pay more taxes. However, the big problem in Mexico is we have, half the population in poverty, but we got the richest man on the world. So that's the problem. The concentration of income is really, really extreme in the case of Mexico, but in a very small upper class. Very, very small. It's less than 1% of the population. But they got around 40% of gross domestic product. And that happens because laws government regulations have allowed that. Now they are also trying to change that. It's very difficult because, of course, there are very powerful people at the moment. But what is interesting is that after the change of the government, recent change of the government, that become an issue that have been, of course, not discussed in public arena before, because that is very powerful people. But, however, now they realize that if they don't change a little bit of that, the country cannot change at all. So they are talking about that, about income redistribution. I mean, I don't think that it's going to be really a redistribution, but they are talking about doing something about that.
You spoke about how education is part of the Constitution, because in the U.S., the federal government doesn't provide education. It's designated down to the states. How is that actually enforced throughout the country, like the educational system? How is that enforced as far as, like, what grade is actually provided benefits from the government, if they are provided benefits at all?
Yes, well, actually, yes. There is a national system of education which is free. So every children have a place in that system. But the thing is that there is not the quality of the education is very low. Actually, one of the main problems of the country now is precisely the union of teachers. Because, there was a reform trying to improve the quality of that public system of education. However, teachers are opposed to that because they can get fired if they don't achieve certain standards. So they are, they have been demonstrating for like 1 or 2 months against that reform. But the thing is, it is a national system of education. It is a place for every children. However, the quality is so low that there is also a private system of education with much better quality, but it's expensive. So practically only the middle class can afford the private system. But that have got advantages, particularly in order to enter the university, because there are no place for everybody in the universities. So people need, even public universities, in order to access, you need to have a test. And of course, people that comes from private schools got most of the places at the university. So although there is a public system of education, it's not working as a mechanism of social mobility in the country. But there is, every children can go to school.
So do you think that increasing the skill of the teachers will increase the types of jobs that children get who go to public schools?
Yes, I think so. It's very important to increase the skill of teachers, yes. But it's very difficult at the moment because there is a system that is very well established, and so it's not going to be easy for them to change and to accept new rules. But I think that that's one of the main issues in Mexico at the moment. They need to improve the quality of public education.
Following up on that, I don't have any statistics on the education either in the United States or in Mexico. But certainly as a matter of logic, there could be a different explanation, which could be that teachers who are in there in the trenches realize that the kids who are actually going to public schools, the state-run schools, are the poorest children. Poverty tends to at least correlate with illiteracy or less literacy. Poor parents are less likely to read to their children, at least in the United States. And therefore, trying to tie performance of students to teachers' performance is problematic because teachers could be doing the best they can, but they don't have any support from the home. I don't know if that's something that's going on in Mexico, if there's any discussion of that, if there's any any data or tests or empirical studies to figure out what's actually going on, but I do know that some of that is going on in the United States, and that was some of the criticism of No Child Left Behind, which in theory was supposed to be something very good, but has actually hurt the poorest states in the United States, like West Virginia, for precisely those reasons. Again, this is not my area of law, but at least that's what I've heard and read.
Yeah, well, of course, that is possible to happen. I mean, if children are for poor families, they have low qualifications at the school. However, in the case of Mexico, that is a problem. But the main problem is that most of public teachers are really, really underqualified. They don't receive, improvements in their skills very often. But the main problem is that no matter how they are, how good or how bad they are, they cannot get fired. Until recently that the reform changed that, like around 2 months ago. But in my particular opinion, it's not going to be easy because most of those teachers, even if the law enforces that they need to be qualified, it's not going to be possible. You cannot change that because, for instance, you don't need to have minimum qualifications to enter this teachers' union, which is the one that assigns the places at the schools. In many cases, the places, the posts are sold or are inherited to members of the family because are very, it's a very good job because they got a lot of benefits. So people want those jobs to resume, I think that there is a problem with poor children, families and background. However, the main problem is the qualification of teachers.
Thank you.
Hi there. I had a question, and it wasn't really about anything that you spoke about directly in your speech, but in America, and it sounds very similar to what I heard you say about Mexico, it seems like the more money you have, the more opportunity you have. And my question centers around the idea of the more money you have, the more access to legal aid you have. Mm-hmm. I know that's true in America. My question is that true in Mexico? And if it is, what is the Mexican government doing or not doing to address the issue of social injustice, a lack of wealth, and access to legal aid?
Well, actually, yes, of course, that's the same. If you get more money, you get better. You can do better through the legal system. In the case of Mexico, there are laws, for instance, for indigenous population which main language is not the Spanish, so that if they are going to go through the legal system, they need to have a translator. For example, things like that. There are a system also of public defenders, which can defend you if you cannot afford a lawyer. However, that is not, in practice there are no policies to enforce that. And one of the main problems the unequal distribution of rights and benefits is that have consequences in the access to justice, because if you cannot afford to have justice. So most of people in jails are very poor people. That's here.
That's here.
Yeah, it's the same. But I think that, I don't know the legal system in the United States very well, but I think that in Mexico is even less policies on that, on equal access to justice, that they are here.
Thank you.
To some degree, this connects to the last question because it has to do with enforcing rights. One problem in enforcing rights, obviously, is if you don't have money, it's hard to get somebody to go to court for you. Two other important points for lawyers to take away from your lecture, I think, are, and let me get this first point straight. You've indicated that social rights, the right to education, the right to health care, the right to social support when you're not working, are actually guaranteed in your Constitution. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. Which is much different than the U.S. Constitution. Now, in the U.S. Constitution, we mostly have the political and civil rights to guarantee, the right to speak, the right to worship, the right to have a free press, etc. And those can be enforced if they're not granted. If I understood your answer to Professor LaFaso's question about the right to work, that right, and I'm guessing these other rights, are rights without remedies. In other words, even if you could afford a lawyer or get legal aid, it sounds like you're saying these are constitutional rights, but a lawsuit cannot be brought to make the government enforce them. You've said that. Is that correct?
Yes, yes, of course.
And do you say that because that has never happened? Or do you say that because the Constitution makes it clear that you cannot bring a lawsuit to enforce a health right or an education right? In other words, if a smart lawyer with enough money wanted to represent some poor people to enforce their health right, has that ever been tried?
No, not at all. And that's a very good question. No, of course not. Well, actually, it is possible to do that. I mean, you can get a very good lawyer and you can sue the government in order to... I think that is possible. I mean, there is not legally impossible. But it don't happen because, I don't know, so many things, because it doesn't happen. But I think that one of the most important is that there is no rule of law. Or the rule of law is not very strong in Mexico. So everybody breaks law. The government is the first and the main doing that. So you can do it, but nobody is going to take you seriously. You know. I think that that's my answer. I don't. It's not impossible, but what you are going to do? Or give me a job? Well, how I can get you a job? I mean, I cannot do that. So no. But it's on the law. Actually, the right to health care have been on law since, many years ago. And it was just after the 2003 that it begins a parallel health system for people without benefits of Social Security. But it's very recent. And at the moment, not everybody have got that because it's an insurance system. People need to pay a low premium, but they need to pay. Not all people actually have that right in practice. But yes, that's a very good thing.
Class action? Sorry. My basic question is just, does this idea of a class action that we have in American jurisprudence exist in Mexico, that a lawyer could represent the class of those denied education, or whatever?
I don't think so. I don't think that there is. Well, at least people is not used to that. I don't know if in the legal system that is possible because, I'm not a specialist in the legal system, but no, it's completely different in that.
Because that would be the logical thing.
Yes, of course.
Civil rights
of
lawyer
course. Yes, but that is not. And one of the reasons I think is that because the people who need it more, that are these informal workers, they are not able to organize. So this idea of class is not present,
Let me push a little bit on that, but not on the class part, but on the other part, the more that what Professor Freiburg was talking about, which is that if it sounds to me like there's a lot of what we're calling rights, which we often use that term in, let's use the English term rights. But there's a legal philosopher from Yale from the turn of the century, Hofeld, and he said we use that term incorrectly, and that we use it for things that that aren't really rights, and that a true right has to have a duty. And so you have to be able to claim something from someone else. So what I'm hearing is really that maybe more that when they say in the Constitution, the Mexican Constitution, well, you have a right, at least the sort of cultural acceptance of that term right now is not that you can now claim a right to work or a right to a certain amount of social protection from the government, but that the government will do nothing to interfere with it. You have a right to pursue work or something like that, which is more like a privilege. And so it sounds like that perhaps there's nothing in the constitutional language that would prevent at some point some interpretation of that to be more broad, but that's not where your country is at culturally. And at least that's what it sounds like to me, and which is kind of where the United States is in a lot of things, where the government, many of the rights that are guaranteed in our Constitution are, although they've evolved in some instances to be greater, very few have evolved to be a right to help to actualize something as opposed to the right to that forbids the government from interfering with things. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah, that's a very good question. The thing with social rights is that it must imply an active participation of the states in guaranteeing those rights. That's different from civil rights and from political rights. That's the reason why social rights are so particular. Because if the rights in the Constitution, is on the Constitution, the government has the obligation to do something about that, to provide that right. Because that's the very definition of social rights, are the rights that let other rights be possible. Because if you have a minimum income, a minimum way to participate in society, so you can access to other rights. You can fight for your civil rights, but you don't have this minimum, income or way of life that led you to go to elections or. So social rights needs to be enforced. In the case of Mexico, they are not, because the rule of law is not very strong. But they are enforced for a very important part of the population, the one that is organized. So for that, there are social rights for the middle class, for the unionized working class. So for that, and they demand those rights to the state.
Do we have any other questions? Because I can continue this conversation with her at dinner, and I'm sure you don't all want to hear my conversation. So does anyone have any other questions for Professor Rodriguez? Should we thank our guests then?
Thank you.